Why do millions of people around the world cry when Frodo throws the One Ring into the fires of Mount Doom? Why do our hearts tremble when Neo takes the red pill, or when Harry Potter stares down Voldemort for the final time? These stories are not merely fiction. They stir something far older, far deeper, a memory written into the fabric of human consciousness itself. They awaken the universal story of the hero, an archetype Carl Jung recognized as one of the most powerful patterns of the psyche. The hero does not only live in myth or cinema. The hero is a mirror of our own inner journey, waiting to be seen, waiting to be lived. And perhaps you too carry within you an adventure that is just beginning, even if you have not yet recognized its call. Before we step into this story together, I invite you to pause for a moment. Look around you. Notice where you are, the time of day, the atmosphere that surrounds you. Then, if you feel called, share it below in the comments. Tell us what city you are in, what hour of the night or day you are listening. And as you do, remember that you are part of a community journeying together through Jung's timeless insights. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel, Carl Jung Stories Unveiled, and activate the notification bell. There are many journeys ahead, and you will not want to miss them. Now let us enter the first threshold. The call to adventure rarely arrives when we feel ready. In the great myths, it often begins in ordinary moments. Hercules is not yet the mighty hero when his labors are set before him. Odysseus, a man longing for home, does not ask for 10 years of wandering. Luke Skywalker begins not as a warrior, but as a restless farm boy staring at two suns on the horizon. Harry Potter is a neglected child, living under a staircase, unaware of his destiny. The call always arrives unexpectedly, sometimes in the form of danger, sometimes in the form of loss, and sometimes as a whisper that life as it is can no longer contain who we are becoming. Jung believed that these mythical calls are not just stories told to entertain. They are symbols of a deep psychic truth. The psyche itself contains patterns of transformation, and the hero is one of the most vital. When life disrupts us with a challenge, an illness, a broken relationship, or a sudden change, it is as though the archetype itself is stirring, urging us to move beyond the walls of what we have known. To Jung, every call to adventure is a moment when the unconscious presses upon consciousness, demanding growth. Think of your own life for a moment. Was there a time when everything felt stable, predictable, even safe, and then something happened that shattered it? Perhaps it was a job you lost, a betrayal that cut deep, a dream that fell apart, or simply a gnawing dissatisfaction with the path you were walking. At first, such moments feel like disasters, but seen through Jung's eyes, they are the first notes of the hero's song. They are the call. Joseph Campbell, deeply inspired by Jung, later mapped the hero's journey as a universal pattern of myth. Yet Jung had already seen its psychological foundation. To ignore the call is to stagnate, to refuse to grow, to remain trapped in a persona that no longer serves. To accept it is to step into the unknown, carrying with us only courage and the faint sense that something greater awaits. In The Matrix, Neo is offered two pills. The blue pill means safety, routine, the illusion of comfort. The red pill means truth, danger, and transformation. That choice, Jung would say, is the call to adventure made visible. And it is the same choice that appears, in subtler ways, in your own life. Will you stay within the familiar, or will you risk stepping into the unknown? The ancient myths always portray the first response to the call as hesitation. Frodo wishes someone else could carry the ring. Luke resists leaving Tatooine. Odysseus resists the summons to war. Even Harry resists believing that he is a wizard. We too resist. We tell ourselves we are not strong enough, not ready, not worthy. Yet Jung taught that these resistances are not signs of weakness, but signs that the ego is about to be stretched beyond its limits. They are part of the sacred drama. Imagine a cocoon. To the caterpillar, the cocoon may seem like a coffin. The safe world of leaves and branches disappears, replaced by darkness and confinement. But in that darkness, transformation is taking place. The old form dissolves, and something entirely new is born. This is what the call to adventure feels like in the soul. At first, it is terrifying, but it is precisely this fear that signals growth is near. Every myth, every film that draws upon the hero archetype, begins with this tension. We, as the audience, feel it too. We identify with the hero's doubts because we know them ourselves. Yet we also feel the stirring of hope, the whisper that says, "What if? What if I could become more than this? What if the world is larger than I imagined?" This is the moment Jung wanted us to notice in our own stories. The call to adventure is not about leaving for distant lands. It is about leaving behind the false comfort of the familiar self. The masks we wear, the roles we cling to, the illusions of control, these are the homelands that the hero must depart. Jung knew that this departure is not optional. Life itself will ensure that the call arrives, whether we like it or not. Perhaps, even now, you feel a call stirring in your life. It may be small, a longing to change your habits, a curiosity about a hidden talent, a yearning to live with more authenticity. Or it may be enormous, a crisis that has cracked your world open, leaving you no choice but to face what you once avoided. Jung would tell you this is not random. It is the hero archetype rising in your psyche, demanding to be lived. The call is always the beginning. It is the first step into the hero's journey, and into the deeper process Jung called individuation, the path of becoming whole, of uniting the conscious and unconscious, of integrating shadow and light. To answer it is to step onto sacred ground, where every difficulty conceals a treasure, and every loss hides a seed of transformation. And so, we stand with the hero at the threshold. The challenge has been given. The world as we knew it is about to change. The cocoon is closing, and the unknown is opening before us. What lies ahead is shadow, trial, and transformation. But before any of that can unfold, the hero must take the most frightening step of all, to face the darkness both around and within. That is where the true journey begins. The moment a hero accepts the call, the world shifts. It is no longer the familiar landscape of home and routine. It becomes a threshold, a place that separates safety from danger, certainty from uncertainty, innocence from transformation. And across that threshold waits the shadow. For Carl Jung, this was one of the deepest truths hidden within myth. Every hero, before claiming their treasure, must face the darkness within themselves. The shadow is not only an enemy lurking outside, it is the unacknowledged part of the self, the impulses we repress, the fears we bury, the desires we deny. Jung described it as the dark brother of the ego, the place where everything we do not wish to see about ourselves resides. When the hero steps forward, the shadow rises to meet them. In this sense, the dragon is never just a monster in the cave. It is the mirror of the hero's inner world. Think of Frodo, burdened by the ring. The darkness he faces is not just Sauron, but the seduction of power that threatens to consume him. Think of Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back, entering the cave on Dagobah, where he confronts Darth Vader. only to find his own face behind the mask. Think of Neo, whose fight with the agents is also a struggle against his own disbelief in himself. These stories endure because they echo the same psychological truth. The hero must wrestle with their shadow, or else be consumed by it. In our own lives, the shadow often appears not as a cloaked villain, but as our anger, jealousy, shame, or fear. It is the resentment we project onto others, the addictions we try to hide, the insecurities that whisper we are not enough. Jung insisted that facing the shadow is unavoidable. If we deny it, it controls us from the dark. If we confront it, we reclaim the energy we have locked away. But facing the shadow is not easy. It is painful to admit that what we condemn in others may also live within ourselves. When we despise dishonesty, we must ask, have I ever lied? When we hate arrogance, we must ask, do I secretly crave superiority? These questions sting because they pierce the mask of the ego. Yet Jung believed that this very pain is the doorway to growth. The myths portray this ordeal vividly. Hercules must battle beasts that embody chaos and violence. Odysseus must resist the songs of the sirens, temptations of pleasure and forgetfulness. Harry Potter must face dementors who feed on despair, forcing him to summon his own inner light. These are not external trials alone. They are the dramatization of the inner war every soul must wage. Facing the shadow is also about endurance. It rarely resolves in a single battle. In The Lord of the Rings, Frodo's confrontation with the ring stretches across the entire journey, each step a heavier burden. Likewise, our own shadows do not dissolve at once. They rise again and again, testing our resolve, demanding patience, humility, and courage. Jung advised that the task is not to destroy the shadow, but to integrate it. The hero does not kill every dragon. Sometimes, the dragon must be understood, even befriended. This is why many myths end with the hero gaining wisdom or power from what once threatened them. The shadow, when faced, becomes a source of strength. That is why Luke, in the end, does not destroy his father but redeems him. Why Frodo, though scarred, returns with a deeper compassion. Why Neo, once unsure, emerges as the One. And in your life, what might this mean? Perhaps it means acknowledging that your anger hides a longing to be respected, that your fear hides a wish to be safe, that your envy hides a dream of living more fully. By facing these truths rather than denying them, you step into your own hero's path. You stop running from yourself, and in doing so, reclaim the very energy that fuels transformation. It is important to remember that every hero trembles before the shadow. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to step forward despite it. To see clearly the darkness within and around us, and to choose not to turn away. Jung wrote that the shadow is 90% pure gold. What he meant was that buried inside our darkest struggles lies the very treasure of our wholeness. So imagine again that you are at the threshold. You have heard the call, and now the shadow rises. Perhaps it is a memory you have avoided, a truth you have silenced, a weakness you have despised. This is the moment when the hero's journey turns inward, when the battlefield becomes the soul. And though it feels like defeat to admit the darkness, it is in fact the first act of true heroism. For only when we face the shadow do we uncover our hidden strength. And only through that strength can we endure the trials ahead. The hero's path is not simply a sequence of victories. It is a slow, relentless unveiling of the self. Each confrontation with the shadow strips away illusion, preparing the hero for allies, mentors, and ordeals yet to come. And so, having faced the shadow, trembling but unbroken, the hero steps further into the unknown. What awaits is not isolation, but unexpected companions, figures who appear along the way to aid the journey, to remind the hero that no one walks this path alone. Every hero who dares to face the shadow soon discovers that they are not entirely alone. Across every great myth, after the moment of terror comes the appearance of helpers, strangers who become allies, companions who offer guidance, or even hidden aspects of the hero's own inner strength. Jung recognized this pattern as more than a storytelling device. It reflects the psyche's wisdom. When we open ourselves to transformation, forces both within and around us begin to rise in support. Consider Frodo on his long march to Mordor. He is joined not only by Gandalf's wisdom and Aragorn's strength, but by the quiet loyalty of Sam, who carries him when he can no longer walk. Think of Luke Skywalker, who gains Han Solo's bravery, Leia's determination, and Yoda's teaching. Or Harry Potter, who could not endure without Ron and Hermione by his side. The pattern is clear. The hero may begin alone, but the journey unfolds in a web of relationships. The allies embody the truth that the hero's growth is not a solitary affair. In Jungian psychology, allies can be seen as symbolic figures arising from the unconscious, what he called helpful archetypes. They are often projected outward, appearing as people who enter our lives at just the right time. A mentor, a friend, even a stranger who offers a word of encouragement can take on mythic significance when we are in the midst of our own trials. These figures reflect resources we already carry within, but have not yet recognized. Have you ever noticed how, in your darkest seasons, someone appeared to offer support when you most needed it? Perhaps it was a teacher whose words lingered long after the lesson, a friend who sat silently by your side, or even a book that seemed to speak directly to your soul. Jung would say these encounters are not accidents. They are synchronicities, meaningful events that reveal the unconscious guiding the path of individuation. In myth, they take the form of allies. In life, they take the form of grace. Yet allies are not only found in others, they also emerge within. Just as Hercules discovers his endurance in the face of endless labor, we too discover hidden qualities when pushed beyond our limits. Courage is not always present at the beginning. It is born in the act of stepping forward. Patience is not gifted. It is forged in hardship. Compassion is not fully formed. It grows as we witness our own vulnerability and that of others. Each new strength that rises in us is like another companion walking beside us on the road. Of course, not every figure who appears along the way is a true ally. Myths are filled with deceivers, tricksters, and false guides. Jung noted that the psyche often presents us with tests disguised as helpers. Sometimes what appears to be guidance is temptation. Sometimes what seems like a friend is a mask for another challenge. These figures remind us that discernment is itself part of the hero's task. The heart must learn to distinguish between voices that lead toward wholeness and those that lure us back into illusion. Still, the essence of this stage is the realization that no hero survives alone. Even in solitude, the hero is carried by the archetypal current of the psyche, which offers resources, insights, and synchronicities at the moment they are needed most. It is as though life itself conspires to assist once we have committed to the path. This is why in countless films and legends, just as the hero falters, an ally appears. It is a symbolic truth. When we surrender to the journey, the world responds. Reflect for a moment on your own story. Who have been the allies in your life? Perhaps a mentor who believed in you when you doubted yourself. Perhaps a friend whose loyalty steadied you through crisis. Perhaps a fleeting encounter that, though brief, altered your course. And beyond people, consider the strengths you discovered within yourself: resilience, creativity, endurance, that revealed themselves only under pressure. These, too, are your allies. Jung would tell you that these allies are not separate from you, but reflections of the greater self, the totality of your being that seeks integration. They are hints that the unconscious is not merely a shadow to be feared, but also a reservoir of guidance and strength. Each ally you encounter, whether external or internal, is a reminder that you are accompanied by something larger than your ego. In stories, this stage often shines with camaraderie. Think of the Fellowship of the Ring, united under a single purpose. Think of Harry and his friends, their laughter amidst danger. Think of the unlikely partnership between Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus. These bonds are not distractions from the hero's quest. They are the very soil in which courage grows. And they echo the truth that our own paths, though unique, are always interwoven with others. The hero's companions do more than lighten the burden. They reflect back aspects of the hero that must be recognized. Aragorn embodies leadership, Sam embodies devotion, Hermione embodies wisdom, Han embodies daring. Each ally is a mirror. In Jung's language, they are projections of inner qualities that the hero must one day claim for themselves. The hero gathers allies because the hero is gathering the lost pieces of the psyche, preparing to become whole. And so, this stage in the journey teaches us something vital: that the way forward is never walked in isolation. Each trial we endure is softened by the presence of allies, whether human, symbolic, or archetypal. They remind us that even in the bleakest night, there is companionship, guidance, and hidden reserves of strength. But allies do not only accompany us, they also prepare us for the next threshold. With their support, the hero dares to step beyond the last traces of safety. To leave the known world behind is terrifying, but with allies at their side, the hero gathers the courage to cross into the unknown. And it is there, in that uncharted territory, that the journey deepens. Every story of the hero eventually reaches a moment when the familiar world can no longer hold them. The village, the home, the safe routines of childhood, these must be left behind. This is the crossing of the threshold, the step that cannot be undone. In myth, it often takes the form of a gate, a forest, a cave, or a boundary between the known and the unknown. In Jung's psychology, it represents the passage from the comfort of the ego into the vast wilderness of the unconscious. Frodo leaves the Shire, stepping into a world of danger he barely understands. Odysseus sails beyond the safe harbors of Ithaca into seas haunted by gods and monsters. Neo wakes from the illusion of the Matrix to face a barren, ruined world. Harry Potter steps through the brick wall at platform 934, entering a hidden realm of magic. In every case, there is no turning back. Once the hero has crossed, the old life dissolves. Jung believed this symbolic crossing mirrors a profound psychological truth. Growth requires stepping beyond what we know. To individuate, to become whole, means risking the loss of our old identity. The ego resists this. It clings to the familiar, even when it no longer serves us. But life, through crisis or opportunity, forces us to cross. And once we do, we cannot remain who we were. Think of your own thresholds. The first day you left home, the moment you committed to a relationship or walked away from one, the leap into a new career, or the decision to leave behind a dream that no longer nourished you. These moments felt terrifying precisely because they were irreversible. Like a door slamming shut behind you, they demanded faith. And yet, on the other side, You discovered a world that stretched you, challenged you, and revealed new parts of yourself. That is the nature of every threshold. It costs certainty, but grants transformation. In mythology, guardians often appear at the threshold. A dragon, a sphinx, a gatekeeper with riddles or trials. These figures symbolize the fear and resistance within us. They ask, are you ready to let go of the old world? Are you willing to risk your comfort for growth? Until the hero says yes, the passage remains closed. This is why the threshold is often depicted as dangerous or forbidding. It dramatizes the psychic truth that we cling desperately to what is known, even if it limits us. To step across requires trust, not in guarantees, but in the mystery itself. Jung called this the leap into the unconscious, the willingness to face what is unknown within. Notice how in films, the threshold is also a shift in tone. When Frodo leaves the Shire, the colors grow darker, the music heavier. When Neo awakens, the world is cold and metallic. When Harry first enters Hogwarts, the atmosphere is both wondrous and intimidating. The threshold marks the end of innocence. Life, once ordinary, now carries mythic weight. And the hero, once naive, begins to sense the depth of the path ahead. For us, this crossing often comes disguised as crisis. A job lost, a relationship broken, a health challenge, a sudden change that leaves us disoriented. At first, it feels like punishment, but from a Jungian perspective, these are threshold moments. The old world collapses, forcing us to step into the unknown. And though it feels like falling, it is in truth the beginning of becoming more than we imagined. Crossing the threshold also brings new awareness. Once we leave the familiar, we see it differently. Frodo comes to realize the Shire is worth saving because he has left it. Neo understands the depth of illusion only after stepping outside it. Harry grasps the hidden magic of the world only after he enters it. Similarly, in our lives, distance from the old gives clarity. We understand what we valued, what we took for granted, and what must change. Jung would remind us that this process is both terrifying and necessary. The unconscious is not tame. To enter it is to face uncertainty, unpredictability, even chaos. But it is also the only way to encounter the deeper layers of the psyche where archetypes dwell. The threshold is therefore both a loss and a gift. It strips away what we thought was secure, and in that stripping, makes space for the self to emerge. Perhaps you are standing at such a threshold now. Perhaps life is asking you to leave something behind, even if you cannot yet see what lies ahead. If so, know that this is not failure. It is the same path walked by every hero, every soul who seeks wholeness. The fear you feel is the guardian at the gate, and the courage you summon will carry you across. Once the hero crosses, there is no going back. The safe world fades into memory, and the journey deepens into territory where transformation becomes possible. The next stage is inevitable, the descent into darkness, the abyss where the true test of the hero unfolds. Every great myth and every unforgettable story eventually brings the hero to a place of darkness, a realm where hope falters and the soul trembles. This is not merely an external setting, it is the descent into the abyss, the place where transformation is most fiercely demanded. Carl Jung recognized this stage as the psychological equivalent of entering the depths of the unconscious. He called it confronting the night sea journey, or the descent into the underworld. To Jung, it was unavoidable. If the hero seeks wholeness, they must pass through shadowed waters where the old self dissolves. Think of Frodo and Sam approaching Mordor, their strength nearly gone, weighed down by despair as much as by the ring itself. Think of Odysseus descending into Hades, where he meets the spirits of the dead and receives warnings for his journey. Think of Neo, seemingly killed by Agent Smith, only to rise with a new awareness of his power. Or Harry Potter walking willingly into the forbidden forest, ready to face death itself. These scenes echo each other across cultures and times because they express a universal psychic truth. No one becomes whole without first dying to who they were. The descent is not glamorous. It is not the thrilling sword fight or the dazzling victory. It is exhaustion, loss, and fear. It is the moment the hero feels most abandoned, when allies seem powerless and the way forward is unclear. In Jung's terms, it is when the ego realizes its limitations. Up to this point, the hero has relied on strength, cleverness, or companionship. But in the abyss, none of these feel sufficient. The hero must surrender to something deeper. Jung saw this surrender as essential. The unconscious holds not only shadow, but also the possibility of renewal. When the ego breaks, when it admits it cannot control everything, the self, Jung's term for the greater wholeness of the psyche, begins to emerge. But to reach that point, one must endure the breaking. This is why the myths portray the abyss with such dread. It is not a place the hero chooses. It is a place life drags them into. Perhaps you have known such an abyss in your own life. A time when everything collapsed at once. A grief so heavy you could not breathe. A failure so deep you wondered if you would ever rise. An illness, a betrayal, a loneliness that seemed endless. In those moments, you may have felt as though you were being undone, and in a way, you were. But Jung would tell you that this undoing is not destruction. It is initiation. The abyss strips away illusions. It reveals what we cling to, what we fear most, what we truly value. It forces us to meet ourselves without masks. And though it feels unbearable, it is the crucible in which the new self begins to form. This is why myths describe heroes emerging from the underworld transformed. Odysseus returns with knowledge, Frodo with compassion, Harry with the strength of sacrifice, Neo with awakened sight. The darkness is not the end. It is the womb of rebirth. Jung often quoted alchemical texts to describe this stage. In the darkness, the gold is found. What appears as despair contains hidden treasure. By entering the abyss, the hero gains not just victory, but depth. Not just survival, but meaning. They discover that the very wound is the place where healing begins. In films, this moment often brings us to tears. When Frodo collapses, unable to go further, and Sam lifts him, whispering, "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you." When Harry closes his eyes in the forest, willing to die for those he loves. When Neo stands up after death, bullets stopping mid-air as he finally believes. These are not spectacles of strength alone. They are revelations of truth. The abyss teaches the hero that power does not come from domination, but from surrender, faith, and integration. In your own life, the abyss may appear less dramatic, but no less real. It may be the sleepless nights when anxiety claws at your chest. It may be the quiet grief of unfulfilled dreams. It may be the long silence when you pray or hope and nothing seems to answer. And yet Jung would remind you, in that very silence, something is stirring. The self is present, waiting to be born. The descent into darkness is therefore not a punishment. It is a passage. Without it, the hero remains shallow, incomplete, untested. With it, the hero gains the depth and compassion that will later become the treasure they return to share. This is why the myths never end in the abyss. They always move forward. The hero, though wounded, rises. The night gives way to dawn. And just as the hero is never truly alone in this descent, neither are you. For even in the deepest abyss, something waits to guide. The figure of the mentor, the archetype of wisdom that appears when the hero is ready to listen. And it is there, in the moment of greatest need, that the mentor's voice is heard, calling the hero toward courage and vision. When the hero has stumbled into the abyss, when hope flickers like a fading flame, it is then that the mentor appears. Sometimes the mentor has been present all along, waiting silently in the background until the right moment arrives. Sometimes the mentor enters suddenly, as though summoned by the depth of the hero's despair. To Carl Jung, this figure is no accident. The mentor represents the archetype of wisdom, the inner guide that emerges when the ego admits it cannot endure alone. Think of Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, returning just when the Fellowship is breaking apart. No longer the Grey Wanderer, but Gandalf the White, radiating strength and vision. Think of Obi-Wan Kenobi and later Yoda in Star Wars, whose teachings carry Luke beyond fear into the depths of the Force. Think of Dumbledore, guiding Harry with riddles and glimpses of the larger truth, even beyond death itself. These mentors are not simply teachers. They are initiators, midwives of transformation. Jung believed the mentor symbolizes the self, the deeper totality of the psyche that transcends the ego. When we listen to the mentor, we are in fact listening to the voice of our own wholeness, the part of us that already knows the way forward. The mentor's appearance in myth dramatizes the moment when this voice becomes audible, when despair cracks the ego just enough for light to enter. In your own life, who have been your mentors? Perhaps a teacher who recognized your potential when no one else did. A parent or grandparent who spoke words that still echo. A book that seemed to address you directly, as though written for your soul. Even dreams can play this role, offering images or figures that carry guidance. Jung himself often turned to his dreams for wisdom, recording the archetypal figures that appeared as mentors in symbolic form. The mentor's role is not to remove the hero's burden, but to awaken the courage to carry it. Gandalf does not destroy the ring for Frodo. Yoda does not defeat Vader in Luke's place. Dumbledore does not shield Harry from the final confrontation. Instead, they remind the hero of who they are, what they can endure, and why their journey matters. The mentor ignites a fire that belongs to the hero alone. Sometimes the mentor teaches through paradox. They offer riddles rather than clear answers, forcing the hero to discover their own strength. Other times, they embody what the hero could become. Morpheus, for example, believes in Neo more than Neo believes in himself, holding up a mirror to the potential hidden beneath doubt. Jung would say this mirrors the psyche's way of guiding us, not by handing us certainty, but by awakening us to our own latent wholeness. There is also a deep tenderness in the mentor archetype. Think of Sam's words to Frodo. Though Sam is a companion, in that moment he becomes a mentor, reminding Frodo of the stories that matter, of the reason they keep walking. Think of Dumbledore's calm assurance, telling Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." These lines strike us because they are more than advice. They are soul truths, delivered at the precise moment when the hero is ready to hear them. In psychology, this stage also reflects the emergence of inner wisdom. When we stop clinging to control, we often find a quieter voice within. It does not shout, it whispers. It speaks through intuition, through synchronicity, through symbols and dreams. Jung encouraged listening to these subtle guides, for they often carry the wisdom of the self. Like the mentor in myth, they do not eliminate struggle, but they illuminate the path. Perhaps you recall a time when you were at your lowest, and suddenly, a word, a dream, or a figure entered your life and gave you strength. At the time, it may have seemed like chance, but through Jung's eyes, this was the mentor archetype at work, reminding you that you are accompanied even when all seems lost. The mentor's presence is never permanent. Eventually, the hero must walk forward alone. But the memory of their words, the spark they kindle, remains. It is enough to carry the hero into the ordeal of sacrifice, where the deepest transformation will demand more than courage. It will demand surrender. No hero's journey reaches its depth without sacrifice. At some point, the path demands not only effort, not only courage, but the willingness to give up something the ego clings to most fiercely. For Carl Jung, this stage represented the dying away of the old self, the surrender of illusions, comforts, and attachments that prevent true individuation. Sacrifice is not merely loss, it is transformation through offering. In mythology, sacrifice appears again and again. Frodo surrenders the Shire's peace to carry the ring into Mordor. Odysseus must abandon the dream of an easy return, suffering storms and trials that strip him of pride. Neo lays down his life to awaken as the One. Harry Potter walks into the Forbidden Forest, offering himself willingly to death so that others may live. Each of these moments pierces us because they dramatize the same truth. Growth requires letting go of what we most want to keep. Sacrifice is not only about physical danger. More often, it is the sacrifice of certainty, of control, of the self-image we carefully protect. Jung observed that the ego resists change because it fears dissolution. To sacrifice is to allow the ego to be undone, to trust that something greater will emerge in its place. This is why the ordeal of sacrifice feels so terrifying. It is a kind of death. But it is precisely in this death that rebirth becomes possible. Think of your own life. Have you ever had to give up a dream that no longer aligned with your deeper truth? Have you surrendered a relationship, a career, or a belief that once defined you, only to find that letting go opened the door to something larger? In those moments, you experienced the archetypal pattern of the hero. Sacrifice carves space for the self to emerge. Jung often pointed to the symbolism of alchemy to describe this process. The alchemists spoke of solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine. The old form must be broken down so that a new form can be created. Sacrifice is the dissolving fire. Without it, there is no gold, no wholeness, no integration. This is why myths insist on the hero's ordeal. Without loss, there is no transformation. The ordeal is also a test of faith. When Frodo reaches Mount Doom, he has no guarantee of survival. When Harry faces Voldemort, he does not know he will return. When Neo confronts Smith, he cannot foresee his awakening. Sacrifice demands stepping into the unknown without assurance. It is the leap that proves the hero's journey is not about external victory, but inner trust. Often, the hero is asked to sacrifice what they love most. This is why the stories cut so deeply. We fear losing what defines us: family, identity, security, even life itself. Yet the paradox is that through sacrifice, these very treasures are returned in a new form. Frodo loses innocence but gains compassion. Odysseus loses ease but gains wisdom. Neo loses fear and gains sight. Harry loses life itself but discovers that love is stronger than death. Jung believed this reflects the central paradox of individuation. To gain the self, the ego must surrender. To discover wholeness, we must allow parts of ourselves to die. The sacrifice is painful, but it is also sacred. It marks the moment when we align not with what we want, but with what the soul demands. Perhaps you too stand before an ordeal of sacrifice. Perhaps life is asking you to release something, a dream, a relationship, a role that no longer fits the truth of who you are becoming. It may feel like failure, like loss, like the end of everything you know. Yet Jung would tell you, this is not the end. It is the doorway to transformation. What feels like dying is, in truth, the soul shedding what no longer belongs. The ordeal of sacrifice also teaches humility. It reminds the hero that they are not omnipotent, not in control of every outcome. This humility becomes the soil in which wisdom grows. Without it, the hero risks becoming a tyrant, consumed by the very shadow they sought to overcome. With it, the hero becomes a servant of life itself, bearing gifts not for themselves alone, but for the community they will return to. And so, as the hero endures sacrifice, something extraordinary begins to happen. Beneath the ashes of loss, a treasure stirs. It is not gold or glory or victory. It is the discovery of the deeper self, the realization that what we sought outside has always been within. This is the next stage of the journey, the revelation of the treasure hidden in the depths of the soul. The myths tell us that after sacrifice comes reward, but it is never quite the treasure we expect. The hero may set out seeking riches, power, or triumph, but what they discover is something far greater and far more intimate. The true treasure is always within. Carl Jung understood this stage as the uncovering of the self, the deeper totality of the psyche that holds both shadow and light. When the ego has surrendered through sacrifice, the door opens to a hidden reservoir of wisdom, wholeness, and strength. Think of Frodo. He does not return from Mordor with gold or glory. He returns scarred, changed, bearing compassion and humility. The journey has carved him into someone who sees the world differently, who understands suffering and resilience in ways he never could before. Think of Neo, whose awakening is not about defeating enemies with fists or bullets, but about seeing the Matrix itself for what it is. Think of Harry Potter, who learns that love, his willingness to lay down his life, is the true magic that saves him. Each hero finds that the treasure was not external conquest, but inner revelation. Jung would say that this stage dramatizes the experience of individuation. The self, long hidden beneath the defenses of the ego, now rises to consciousness. We discover qualities we never believed we possessed: resilience, courage, love, wisdom. We realize that the treasure is not something to be taken, but something to be lived. It is an inner transformation that radiates outward into the world. In your own life, you may have known moments when hardship stripped you bare, and yet, in that emptiness, something luminous appeared. Perhaps you found compassion where once there was judgment. Perhaps you discovered creativity where once there was fear. Perhaps you realized a strength that only suffering could reveal. These are glimpses of the inner treasure. They are the gold hidden in the darkness. This treasure is not always easy to accept. Jung noted that many resist their own wholeness. We cling to small identities because the fullness of the self feels overwhelming. To accept our greatness, our responsibility, our potential, can be more frightening than to remain small. This is why myths often depict the hero hesitating even after finding the treasure. Frodo struggles to let go of the ring. Luke resists the truth of his lineage. The treasure demands not only discovery, but acceptance. Yet once accepted, the treasure reshapes everything. The hero returns not as the same person who departed, but as someone marked by depth. They carry a light that others can feel, even if unspoken. Jung described this as the individuation process, complete in part. The conscious and unconscious reconciled, the shadow integrated, the self revealed. The treasure is not an object to display, but a new way of being. Reflect for a moment. What treasures have you uncovered in your own story? Perhaps resilience born of grief, perhaps empathy born of suffering, perhaps wisdom born of failure. These qualities may not glitter like gold, but they are the riches of the soul. They are the gifts you carry back into the world. In film and literature, this stage often moves us most deeply. When Harry embraces the truth of love's power, when Neo sees the Matrix for what it is, when Frodo, though broken, returns to the Shire with eyes that perceive its beauty more profoundly. These moments are luminous because they reveal what Jung knew. The treasure of the hero is not external victory, but inner wholeness, and so, the hero now holds the treasure. But the journey is not yet complete. Jung emphasized that individuation is never for oneself alone. The hero must bring the treasure back to the world, sharing it with others, transforming not only their own life, but the lives of those around them. This return is the final test, for the hero must step back into the ordinary world while carrying extraordinary wisdom. The time has come for the hero to turn homeward, carrying the gift that can heal and illuminate the community. The return is not easy. It requires bridging two worlds, the inner and the outer. But without it, the treasure remains incomplete. The hero must walk back into life, bearing the light of what they have found. The hero who has endured the call, the shadow, the abyss, the mentor's guidance, and the sacrifice now stands holding the treasure. But the story does not end in the depths of the cave. The hero must return. Jung saw this return not as a mere closing chapter, but as the very point of the journey itself. The gifts discovered in darkness are not meant to remain hidden. They are to be brought back, shared with the community, and integrated into life. Frodo and Sam do not remain in Mordor. They return to the Shire, carrying both scars and wisdom. Odysseus does not linger in foreign lands. He returns to Ithaca, where his trials reshape how he rules. Harry Potter does not stay in the forest. He returns to Hogwarts to face Voldemort, not for himself, but for everyone. Neo does not vanish into the digital void. He re-enters the world, awakening others to truth. The hero's journey is never selfish. Its final arc is always return and service. Jung believed this reflected the deepest aim of individuation. To discover the self is not to retreat into solitude forever, but to rejoin the world with greater wholeness. The treasure of inner growth must be lived out in relationships, in creativity, in the way we touch others' lives. Otherwise, it remains sterile, locked away in the unconscious. Transformation reaches completion only when it radiates outward, but returning is not easy. The myths remind us that the hero often struggles to reintegrate. Frodo finds the Shire unchanged, but he himself has been irrevocably altered, so much so that he cannot fully belong anymore. Odysseus must reclaim his home from chaos. Harry must grieve those lost, even as he steps into a new era. Neo must live with the knowledge that reality itself is fragile. The return carries its own trials, because it demands balance between the extraordinary and the ordinary. Perhaps you know this in your own life. After a crisis, an awakening, or a deep transformation, you return to family, work, and community, and realize you are no longer the same. The old routines feel shallow. The conversations feel different. You see the world with new eyes. This dissonance can be painful, Jung described it as the challenge of integration. It is not enough to awaken inwardly. One must weave that awakening into daily existence. The hero's return also raises questions of responsibility. With greater awareness comes the obligation to live differently. Wisdom demands to be acted upon. Compassion asks to be expressed. Strength seeks to protect and to serve. To carry the treasure home is to accept that one's life is now a vessel for something larger than personal survival. This is why the hero is often portrayed not as triumphant, but as humbled, aware that their journey has transformed them into a servant of something greater. Jung emphasized that this is where the journey touches the collective. Individuation does not isolate us, it reconnects us. The hero returns with gifts for the tribe, the village, the community. Sometimes those gifts are knowledge, sometimes healing, sometimes simply presence. But always, the hero's return enriches the world. Reflect on your own story. Have you ever come back from hardship with a deeper ability to listen, to comfort, to create, to guide? Have others felt the difference, even if they could not name it? If so, you have lived the hero's return. Your scars became stories. Your wounds became wisdom. Your trials became treasures for others. The myths remind us that return is not only an end, but also a beginning. The hero's story inspires those who witness it, awakening them to their own call. In this way, the journey becomes a circle. One hero's return becomes another's call to adventure. And so the pattern repeats, generation after generation, psyche after psyche. Yet Jung pointed out that the return is not simply about others. It is also about reintegration within the hero. The conscious and unconscious, shadow and treasure, ego and self, all must find balance. Without this, the hero risks imbalance, arrogance, detachment, or despair. Integration ensures the treasure is not just carried, but lived day by day, choice by choice. And so the hero steps back into the world, changed yet familiar, bearing the gold that was always hidden within. But Jung's insight carries us one step further. He saw in the hero's journey not just myth, but the very process of individuation, the lifelong task of becoming whole. To understand this connection is to see that every hero story, from ancient myth to modern cinema, is a mirror of the soul's deepest work. The next step in our path, then, is to explore this link fully. How the hero archetype is woven into Jung's vision of individuation, and why every struggle of our lives can be understood as part of that sacred journey. Carl Jung often insisted that the hero's journey was not merely a myth told to entertain, but a profound psychological map of individuation. Individuation, in Jung's language, is the process of becoming whole, the lifelong unfolding of the self through the integration of the conscious and unconscious. The hero archetype is its living symbol, dramatizing the steps by which every soul grows into authenticity. To see the hero clearly is to glimpse the path of our own becoming. The early stages of the hero's journey, answering the call, facing the shadow, crossing thresholds, mirror the first stirrings of individuation. These are the moments when the unconscious pushes into awareness, disrupting the ego's comfortable patterns. A dream, a crisis, or a longing unsettles us, just as the call unsettles Frodo or Neo. Individuation begins when we stop denying these disturbances and begin to listen. The confrontation with the shadow is perhaps the most crucial overlap. Jung taught that individuation requires us to acknowledge what we have repressed, the anger, fear, envy, and vulnerability we hide. Myths dramatize this as the hero battling monsters or adversaries. Luke facing Vader, Harry confronting Voldemort, Frodo bearing the ring, all reflect the psychic truth that wholeness demands we face our inner darkness. The hero archetype makes visible what individuation demands, not destruction of the shadow, but integration of it. The descent into the abyss parallels what Jung described as the nigredo, the dark stage of alchemy where old structures dissolve. Individuation is not smooth or easy. It involves collapse, confusion, and despair. Yet it is precisely in this breakdown that the self can emerge. The abyss in myth symbolizes this breaking open. Without it, the hero remains shallow, the psyche fragmented. With it, a deeper unity becomes possible. The mentor, too, has its psychological counterpart. In individuation, guidance arises from within. The self, dreams, synchronicities. Outwardly, it may appear as a wise figure or a book that speaks to us at the right time. Inwardly, it is the voice of our own wholeness, whispering through symbols and intuition. Just as Neo listens to Morpheus, or Harry to Dumbledore, so too we learn to listen to the subtle wisdom of the self. Sacrifice is essential in both myth and psychology. Individuation demands letting go of rigid identities, roles, and illusions. To grow, we must surrender the ego's false security. This is the hero's ordeal. Frodo surrendering innocence, Neo surrendering fear, Harry surrendering life itself. Each sacrifice clears space for a deeper self to arise. Individuation is never about adding more layers. It is about stripping away until the essence is revealed. And then comes the treasure, the realization of the self. In myths, it appears as wisdom, power, or love. In individuation, it is the integration of opposites, the recognition that we are more than the ego's narrow image. The treasure is not external. It is the awakening of inner wholeness. Jung believed that this experience is what gives life meaning. Without it, we remain fragmented, tossed by forces we do not understand. With it, we live from a deeper center, aligned with the archetypal pattern of the psyche. The hero's return mirrors the final stage of individuation, integration into life. Jung warned that spiritual insight without embodiment is dangerous. To glimpse the self is not enough. We must live it in the marketplace, in relationships, in the ordinary world. The hero must carry the treasure back, just as the individuated person must bring their wholeness into daily choices. Otherwise, the journey remains incomplete. This is why myths continue to speak so powerfully. They show us what individuation looks like in symbolic form. Frodo, Harry, Neo, and Luke are not merely fictional characters. They are mirrors of the psyche, dramatizing the universal journey toward wholeness. Their struggles remind us that we, too, are on this path. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The hero archetype reveals the shape of that privilege. It reminds us that every challenge, every shadow, every sacrifice is part of a sacred journey toward authenticity. Individuation is not a luxury. It is the destiny written in every soul. And so, having seen how the hero archetype embodies individuation, we arrive at the most personal step of all, to awaken the inner hero in our own lives. For Jung's great insight was not only that myths describe the psyche, but that each of us is living those myths here and now. The question is no longer whether the hero exists. It is whether you will recognize and embrace the hero within yourself. Every myth we have explored, the wanderings of Odysseus, the courage of Frodo, the awakening of Neo, the sacrifice of Harry Potter, points not outward, but inward. For Carl Jung, the hero was never merely an ancient legend or a cinematic figure. The hero was, above all, an inner presence, a potential that lives in every human being. To awaken the inner hero is to realize that your struggles, your losses, your triumphs are not random accidents, but chapters in a mythic story written deep within the psyche. The inner hero calls each of us in unique ways. For some, it arrives as a quiet longing, an urge to live with more authenticity, to shed the masks of persona. For others, it comes as crisis, a collapse of certainty that forces us to search for meaning. And for still others, it emerges through dreams, synchronicities, or a sense that life itself is asking for more than mere survival. However it arrives, the call is always the same: to step beyond fear and claim the deeper truth of who we are. But awakening the inner hero is not about grandiose feats. It is about how we face the ordinary trials of daily life. To choose honesty when deceit would be easier. To forgive when bitterness would harden the heart. To persevere in love when indifference tempts us. These are acts of heroism as profound as any in myth. Jung insisted that individuation was not an escape from life, but a fuller engagement with it. The hero within us asks not for perfection, but for courage. We often imagine heroes as flawless, yet the myths remind us otherwise. Frodo is broken, Luke is torn by doubt, Harry is scarred, Neo hesitates. Their imperfections are not obstacles, they are the soil of their transformation. So it is with us. Our wounds, Jung taught, are not signs of failure, they are doorways to depth. To awaken the hero within is to see that our scars are not shameful but sacred, the very places where light can enter. This awakening also changes how we see others. When we recognize our own hero's path, we begin to see the same in those around us. We realize that everyone carries a hidden battle, everyone faces shadows, everyone is called to sacrifice. This recognition breeds compassion. The hero within us awakens the ability to honor the hero within others. In this way, our personal journey becomes a collective blessing. Awakening the inner hero also means listening to the self, the deeper center Jung described. This is not the voice of the ego, which clamors for approval and control. It is the quieter voice of intuition, of conscience, of symbolic dreams. It often whispers rather than shouts, guiding us toward choices that may not be easy but are true. The hero within awakens when we trust this voice, when we allow it to lead us into the unknown with faith rather than certainty. Perhaps you feel that stirring now. Perhaps a challenge in your life has left you standing at a threshold. Perhaps a shadow has risen that you can no longer deny. Perhaps a sacrifice looms, demanding courage you are not sure you possess. If so, Jung would tell you, this is not the end. This is the beginning of your hero's path. The archetype itself has awakened in you, calling you toward wholeness. And when you answer, even falteringly, you join a lineage as old as humanity. You walk beside Odysseus, Frodo, Neo, Harry, and countless unnamed figures from myth and history. You become part of the eternal pattern of the psyche's unfolding. You discover that the hero is not only out there in stories, but alive within your own beating heart. The journey does not promise ease, it promises transformation. It does not guarantee victory as the world defines it, but it guarantees meaning. Jung believed that to live without meaning is to suffer a spiritual starvation. But to live as the hero, even in small, hidden ways, is to drink from the well of purpose itself. And so, the final insight is this: you already carry the hero. The treasure you seek is not elsewhere. It is in your courage to walk forward, in your willingness to face darkness, in your capacity to love despite fear. The hero is not waiting to be found. The hero is waiting to be remembered. This remembrance brings us full circle, from call to shadow, from sacrifice to treasure, from return to awakening. The hero's journey is the shape of individuation itself. And now, as we reach the end of this exploration, the story turns back to you. What will you do with your call? What treasure waits in your depths? What return will you make to the world? For the hero is not a distant figure. The hero is you. The hero, Jung reminds us, is not the one who never fears, but the one who steps forward despite trembling. To live heroically is not to slay dragons in distant lands, but to face the dragons that rise in our own hearts: fear, doubt, despair, and pride. Each time you confront these shadows, you enact the archetype that has guided humanity for millennia. Think of Frodo returning from Mordor, carrying scars that never fully heal, yet bringing home a wisdom that reshapes the Shire. Think of Odysseus, weathered and worn, reclaiming his place not with arrogance but with the humility of one who has endured. Think of Harry, no longer the boy in the cupboard, but the young man who knows that love outlasts death. Think of Neo, no longer blinded by illusion, but awake to the deeper truth. In each of these, you see reflected the path you too are walking. Jung taught that archetypes are universal because they live in every psyche. The hero is not a story told to others. It is the story lived by you. When you face your challenges, when you accept your sacrifices, when you discover your treasures and share them, you are embodying the hero. You may not wear a cape or carry a sword, but your courage is no less sacred. And this, perhaps, is the greatest treasure: to realize that your life itself is mythic, that your choices ripple outward, that your struggles have meaning, that your victories are not only for yourself, but for those who will follow. Every act of authenticity, every moment of compassion, every step into the unknown is part of the great story of humanity's unfolding. So as we close this journey through Jung's vision of the hero, I invite you to see your own life with new eyes. Do not dismiss your struggles as meaningless. Do not belittle your courage as small. The archetype of the hero lives in you as surely as it lived in Odysseus, Frodo, Neo, and Harry. You too are part of the eternal pattern. And when the next call arrives, and it will, may you recognize it for what it is: the invitation to live as the hero you already are. Step into the unknown, face the shadow, accept the sacrifice, claim the treasure, return with wisdom, and above all, remember, the journey's goal is not perfection, but wholeness. The hero is not far away. The hero is already within you.